My name is Rosemary Okello Lale. Currently, I'm the director of the Africa Media Hub at the Strathmore University Business School. And I started this hub in 2018 when I left the Ford Foundation, where I was a program officer. And before then, I was actually the executive director of the Africa Women and Child Future Service, where we started with the colleagues in 1994. And the history of what we used to call it AWC Features was a global media network of women journalists that started as a result of realizing that women's voices and children's rights were not being captured and reflected in the media. And most of the media houses never had policies around that. Neither did they have also capacity. So we took an initiative with various colleagues across the globe, especially within the southern part of Africa, initiated by Colleen Lomona, who was by that time the executive director of the Women's Future Service and also Interpress News Service that was based in New Delhi, that we need to start a platform for women. Hence, AWC, the Africa Women Future Service. The history of the Kenya Editors Guild can go back way in late 90s, when we were called to attend the Southern Africa Editors Guild conference. By that time, Nelson Mandela was the president. And after the conference, we made a courtesy call to his office as the leaders of the media within the continent. And then he actually challenged us that you are here talking about the freedom of the media, the freedom of the people, democracy. And does the media as a sector have a regulatory body that can be able to actually monitor these policies in a manner that enhance the media growth, but also make the media serve the people, especially the marginalized community. And by that time, we're focusing on women and children, and also those who could not access the media. In South Africa, then we thought of, can we start the Africa? So we started the Africa Editors Guild there. And Matata Setu was the chair. I was the secretary of the Africa Editors Guild. And there's a colleague in actually Senegal who was now the deputy chair. So it was a continental body. So when I saw it being a continental body, when I came back home in Kenya, I realized that how can then the media in this country come together and also have a collective voice the way we had already created in the continent. So when I came back, I called the editors' breakfast, as it was called, where the editors attended and actually told them they need to have a Kenya Editors Guild. And so Wagebe Mwangi, who was that time the editor-in-chief of the Nation, actually agreed with me and said that there's need for us to start it. So the editors from the Nation, Standard, all the editors came together. And when we formed it, I again became the first secretary of the Kenya Editors Guild. There are quite a number of challenges we faced, not only from internal, but also within the regulatory body, who felt that by the editors coming together was going to give a strong voice, was going to give a strong stand for, because whenever they wanted to use the media, they could only call one media houses. But when the editors were together, they were not only looking about the policy, but also the sector under which they were operating. For example, if a journalist was arrested, all the media could come together and say a statement and say that that's illegal, that's actually going against the human rights. And so it was a strong voice that also was actually recognized by the government. So especially when you are registering it. Yeah, we took time to register it. And Kalonzo, the then cabinet minister of information, helped us quite a lot. Yeah, and we visited him actually in his offices, whereby we presented a concept. Once he presented a concept, he was able to table it to the cabinet. And then thereafter, we formed the Kenya Editors Guild. And the Kenya Editors Guild was recognized now as a regulatory body. At that time, Media Council was not there. So then they said that the Kenya Editors Guild cannot be a regulatory. What can you form to make sure that this policy that KEG is trying to reinforce is articulated within the governance structure of the government? Hence, the Media Council was formed. It must have been late 90s because early 2000. The academia came in because the academia are the capacity builders. They are the knowledge enhancer, and they're the training stations where all the media practitioners pass through, like the Nairobi University, like the School of Journalism, various institutions within the country train journalists, even here at Strathmore. But we were saying that unless they can become as members, they will not be able to understand the culture and also the spectrum under which the media come. So they're coming in, bringing in the academic angle to the membership. Yeah. I think building a governance structure of KEG was critical, was very important. And KEG having its own offices, and KEG, the administrative office was separate from the governing structure that were now the secretary and the chair, which could only be there for a few years and then you are re-elected by members. So during our term, after I served 2 terms, then we had to leave for the other people to come in because we are building leaders for tomorrow. We are building capacity. So we're kind of creating a lasting institution that is going to last. And going back to Nelson Mandela, what's the legacy are you leaving? I think funding should not be an issue for KEG because KEG is a critical body that ensure that unless we have a regulatory and policy framework under which the media houses, and this include private sector, comes in, will not have a media house that is working for the people. And even the business community who sees media as a critical role in enhancing their business might not find it viable. So it's of the interest of the general public. And when we talk about funding, as funding has changed, we are now talking about local philanthropy. Media houses, they make money. What kind of money percentage can they do to make sure that they give to KEG to strengthen KEG as part of the policy strengthening of their media houses? Thirdly, the government has got a role to play because KEG actually has got even government representative like the Voice of Kenya is part of it. The KBC, Kenya Broadcasting Corporation, is part of it, and all the government agencies. So it's we call a unitizing body that is bringing all the media practitioners from the community to the national. And KEG now is linked to the continental. And then continental is linking to the global. That is where the World Editors Guild come in. So it's a long-lasting body that cannot be allowed to die. So when now we agreed that KEG was going to be formed, there was an interim committee that was set up that I was actually spearheading. And that brought in Wagethi Mwangi, Joseph Odindo, Macharia Gaitho, Pamela Makotsi, Jane Godia, and there was, I think, quite a number of various editors that were formed together to ensure that we spearhead the formation of the Editors Guild. Looking at the history of the International Women's Day, it's about realization of the women's role and the women's impact into a global agenda, hence the International Women's Day. And today that's set apart to recognize the women, not only as a body, but as a community that can be able to be used to bring changes, either in development, either in community, either in household. So give to gain personally, I see it that unless we take it from an individual point of view, what can I give? For example, when you have children and you have girls, many communities do not consider girls as children, even now. And yet, when you take personal initiative to say, I want my daughter to be like any other person in the world, by taking them to school, by taking them to various colleges, they'll become leaders that can be able to impact that community. So it starts by a personal initiative. Yes, there's policy framework. There's the Beijing Platform for Action that actually adopted gender, one-third gender rule that every government should have, even not government, but every organization and communities. But the gap and the challenge has been that there's never been what we call personal initiative in ensuring that gender equality is achieved. Hence, I think the theme for this year is a more reflective theme as opposed to talking at government, but talking to the rest of the community. What can we give to gain from the girl child, from the women, from our leaders? And this road did not start with us. It started with various women leaders who gave their time, their personal life, And also their aspiration, talk of FBSCO, talk of Wangari Maathai, talk of various leaders who ensure that, in fact, if FBSCO, you hear the story of Honorable FBSCO, she was the only woman member of parliament during her time. And the way she was being stereotyped, heckled at times, and being shown, she withstood as a leader. She gave that we can, and showed us that we can be able to make it. Now we can see many women leaders, representatives, and even the Constitution has made it possible to have it. But we still have got a long way to go. The journey is still big. During our time, there are quite a number of few women who are editors in the newsroom. And when actually you went into the newsroom as a woman reporter, you are given not quote unquote strong stories that were seen as political. You are given as what we call, soft stories, that you go and cover community, you go and cover this, because they didn't see us as that skilling can be able to bring the thinking behind the strong stories that would be able to impact policy. And there was a women's desk that was given. So many a times we attached to the women's desk. But now we are seeing that women can be able to do all the stories, irrespective of which angle or which framework. But also we've got women who can make decisions in the media. Then what we need to look into is the impact of gender mainstreaming in media policies, how they use it in a single day, not only through stories, but also through the entire structural framework, how the women can be able to grow in that structure. Yes, when actually reflecting back, when we saw that the newsrooms had just one page or just 2 seconds to focus on the women's issue, the women, actually we call ourselves women editors within the African continent, decided that we want to actually start to bring the voices of women, not only within the sector we're working in, but also within the platforms under which these policies were being discussed, like the UN conferences. So we came together and said, we want actually to do daily newspapers for all the UN conferences to focus on what are the gender priorities within that conference. So we could go to even the UNEP conference and start producing a daily newspaper in New York, focusing on gender perspective of the conference. We went to Beijing and produced a daily newspaper. And so when we started, actually, the word gender was not a factor then. It was women's issue. And the word gender came in when women leaders met in West Africa to talk about their positioning to Beijing conference. Hence, the word gender came about. So we were called again to produce the newspaper in Beijing from a gender perspective, focusing on gender and strengthening the discussion about the one gender principle. So that saw us even went up to even Italy or other parts of the world to do those newspapers. So we were able to bring a global community, not only women journalists, but even men journalists, to work with us to produce those stories. Personally, I'm proud of the impact of KEG, that as an organization that started by looking inward, it has been able to gain recognition within the policymakers, but also within the global. Even looking at how KEG was part of the recent African Editors Forum that took place in February. But looking back, some of the key impact of KEG was that KEG became an authority voice that even leaders could be able to look up into. And that made it possible for KEG to start an initiative that was never there before, called the presidential debate, that could bring all the presidential aspirants together in a live forum to debate, to tell the world and also Kenyans what it is that they want to be as a leader. And that started in 2017 when we held the first presidential debate. And this was as a result of actually partnering with the World Editors Forum and also learning from the US presidential debate. You believe in yourself. And believing in yourself is what kind of a person you want to be. Part of my life, young, I grew up in the rural areas, though in Nairobi here, and also now globally traveled almost. I think there's no part of the world I've never been. I was saying, there's no continent I've never touched as Rosemary. But that did not come as Rosemary. It came with people holding my hand, people mentoring me, and also looking up to me and giving me an opportunity. And one of my mentees, I can just say in the news media, was Lucy Oriang, who was actually the chief and editor within the newsroom under the women's desk. Dorothy Munyahu now was one of my leaders. Globally, I can say Christian Anampu was some of the people not only I looked up to, but I had opportunity to engage. And also within the continent, Colleen Lomona was one of the key people. We worked closely and mentored me to be what I am. So being what you can give is that every one of us can be able to mentor a leader for tomorrow. Every one of us is able to actually work with young people to show them that you can make it so that they can believe in themselves. We are in the new media, and the social media is taking shape. And by the time somebody decide I want to do media, I want to become a professional media, they've already engaged with social media. Some of them even have their own platform, TikTok, among others. So the whole idea is how can we be able to shape their thinking into content creation that showcase some of the issues that we are talking about. And content here, I mean that data and using actual AI is critical, though we say that in the new framework we're working in, that AI is taking over our job as media people. And that's not the case, because AI actually is using the content under which we are giving. So that the writing real content development stories, analytic stories, or policy making stories, and also investigative journalism is still critical. So my wish is that how can we be able to work with these skilled, quote unquote, young journalists to be able to actually develop real content that can be able to shape policy, transform communities, and also empower the community to be where we want to be in a global world. If you're serious, the women in the media, it's time to actually let go that women are just there to do certain stories. Women are skilled like any other, and women are leaders like any other. And we need to let go of the fact that a woman leader comes in with their own spectrum, but a woman leader comes in as a leader like any other leader. And they can be able to actually lead a whole media industry to where it is, and to actually adapt the women leadership as a key instrumental role in managing the media. Actually, you are into a sector that is powerful, a sector that will never be ignored, a sector that will always be there. Because media did not start yesterday. Media started with, even our historians tell us, with the grandmother storytelling. Conversation will always take place. Conversation will always engage. People will always like to know what is happening. So young people like you need to see this sector as a sector that is there to be used for the future, even the new technology. How can you reposition yourself in a skilled manner? Find what we call a kind of a specialized area. You can pick, I'll give an example like women and climate change, or gender and climate change. You can bring women and agriculture, or gender and agriculture. You can pick also other areas like women in politics and leadership. Now we are talking, because political framework will always be there. And those stories will always be there. Case studies and feature writing, skilling yourself to become a specialist, and so that the world will know that you're an expert in this area.